Ever since gaining CHL Exceptional Status back in 2019, Shane Wright has been under the spotlight in the hockey world. But ever since dropping in the 2022 NHL Draft, Shane Wright's career has kind of gone quiet. Toiling away down in the AHL, how has Shane Wright's career progressed, and was he worthy to be dropped to 4th overall back in 2022? Well, make sure you watch till the end as we go through the complete Shane Wright update, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey and prospect talk just like this all throughout the year. Now we're going to dive deep into the complete Shane Wright update because it ain't looking too good. But first, let's talk about today's sponsor in Sleeper Fantasy. All you got to do is pick more or less on different NHL players every day. And yesterday we ended up doing Evan Bouchard and Seth Jarvis, both higher than 0.5 points. Both got more than one super easy dub for 25 bucks. I figured out my strat with two simple picks every day. First, I got Matthew Tkachuk, higher than 0.5 points versus brother with the Ottawa Senators. And then, of course, I got Jack Hughes higher than 3.5 shots versus Washington. Tkachuk is at a point in all 5 of his last games. Jack Hughes has been especially hot lately, coming back from injury. Let's get these going, boys. Make sure you guys go to the description, click on the link, and sign up to Sleeper Fantasy using promo code GRAV on your first deposit, and you can get up to a $500 match. If you put in $20, you'll get 20 plus free bucks. A heck of a deal there. And as I talked about in yesterday's video, when you guys sign up with my code, I want to see what you guys are picking. Let me know which players you guys are going more or less on. And of course, thank you to Sleeper Fantasy for sponsoring today's video. Now let's talk about Shane Wright and his really weird career path coming up to this point with the Seattle Kraken. Being, of course, a 4th overall pick, he was pretty much pegged as a 1st overall guy for a lot of his career. After getting exceptional status and playing in his first year in the OHL in 2020, where you'd get 66 points in 58 games with 39 goals, the sky was the limit here. But unfortunately, COVID would have other ideas, and this was really the first major setback, I think, in Shane Wright's career. Because of COVID, he wouldn't play any OHL games with Kingston in 2021 and would only play 5 World Junior games, which he did look pretty good in the U18s, getting 14 points, 9 goals in 5 games. But even if he did look good, it just wasn't enough time to really show what he was made of. And even though you could see some improvements, if he played the full year in the OHL, we probably would have seen even more. And then we go on to his draft year in 2022, which with Kingston points-wise was pretty dang good. In 63 games, got 94 points and 14 points in 11 playoff games. But even though he looks pretty good in his draft year, there were some points where the hype train was kind of starting to dwindle. He wasn't looking like this generational prospect that some exceptional status players come out to be. But in Shane Wright's case, he was good, he was solid in his draft year, but definitely didn't overwhelm anybody. And that's where we start to get into that second half of the year, where you had prospects like Juraj Slafkovsky, Logan Cooley, Nemec looking absolutely incredible in their own right. Yet with Shane Wright, he was pretty much just the same player he had been over the last couple of years. And then leading up to the draft, as players got even more experience, Shane Wright was sitting at home and his draft stock kind of started to be in question. At some points, he was still looked at as the favorite to be selected 1st overall, but it was by no means a sure thing. We started to get word of Juraj Slafkovsky coming off some great Olympics and World Championship play that he could be in the race for the 1st overall pick. And of course, with Montreal having the deciding choice here, it really became a contentious topic. Now, for me personally, it wasn't much of a surprise, at least on draft day. It was really up to Montreal whether Shane Wright was going to drop or not. And of course, he ended up going 4th overall. But once Montreal selected Juraj Slafkovsky, it was pretty much set in stone that he would be dropping to at least number 4. With Montreal selecting Slafkovsky, it ended up going to New Jersey with the 2nd overall pick, and they were going to select a D-man no matter what. They weren't going to go for another center, Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier in the system. They were going to go for a D, whether it was Jiricek or Nemec, and of course, they ended up going for the Solvac. And with Logan Cooley going 3rd, that was also a pretty big guarantee. We heard a lot about how Arizona loved Cooley in his draft year for a very good reason, and they were going to select the high-paced player in the end, which of course left Shane Wright going 4th overall to the Kraken. In his draft year, even though I still ended up ranking him number 1, I had some concerns with that pace. I had some concerns with how much he was going to be able to dictate play offensively. He had a fantastic shot. His playmaking was really underrated. He was a fantastic outlet passer, but this was a guy that I think had some really top-end issues. There were some concerns over whether he'd be a true franchise first-line center, and I think so far we've seen those issues really exacerbated. I think we know now, even though Shane Wright is still 20 years old, that he's not going to be this exceptional status level player in the NHL. He'll probably still end up as a top 6 centerman, but definitely not a first overall worthy or a player that's going to be really a franchise leader for any team, let alone Seattle. But I think that draft definitely exposed concerns in Shane Wright's play, and we've seen those concerns kind of validated over the past couple of years. And as we've seen some of the 2022 draft finally rise up into the NHL, Shane Wright is still kind of dwindling in the AHL system with Coachella, and although playing well, maybe not as dominant as you'd like to see. Especially for someone that I had ranked first overall, even though he's been solid, he definitely hasn't been unbelievable. And you can see after he was drafted last year with Seattle, he played some NHL games, played some AHL games, and ultimately played in the playoffs, playing pretty well there, but played most of his season in the OHL where he really didn't need to be. He had already learned a lot of lessons there already and needed to play at the pro level. And at the World Juniors, he was solid for Canada, especially in a defensive captaincy role, was great in that aspect. But again, those issues with that top-end offensive ceiling, he was one of the players that was kind of inconsistent in that regard for the Canadians, and there were players a lot more impressive than him at that same level, which rose some more concerns there too. You look at what he was able to do last year, and it was kind of a weird couple of months for him. If you remember, he was in the NHL level. They were kind of just using him in practices, not really using him all too much. He played a couple games here and there, but ultimately was sent down again and played some AHL games, would go to the OHL, would play in the World Juniors, and would finish up in the AHL playoffs. But overall, it was just kind of a fine year for him, and another year where there wasn't, again, that much progression, or at least didn't feel like it. Then we go on to this season where he would get a little bit of a chunk of change in the NHL a little while back, playing 3 games, getting 0 points, but most of this season has been spent in the AHL, getting accustomed to the pro level. And you can see in 43 games, he right now has 18 goals, 14 assists for 32 points, and he's kind of gone on a little bit of a dry spell recently. It was looking a lot better maybe a month ago or so, but Shane Wright has been solid for Coachella. He's looked good, and in special moments has looked pretty solid for them and a leader on the team, but at the same time, again, hasn't truly dominated like you wanted to see out of him. At this point, though, I think Shane Wright has kind of shown us what he can be, and even though he is still especially young, and again, just turned 20 years old a month ago, I don't think he's ever going to be this dominant player, this puck hound, this guy that really has this unreal offensive ceiling that I kind of wanted him to have. I kind of always just assumed that there might have been some stagnation in his draft year, but he would get over it. We'd see a lot more learning and a lot more adaptability in his game, but really there just hasn't been that. He's probably still going to turn out pretty solid, but again, that hope that he'd be this amazing offensive force, I just don't know if you can say that right now. Now, I did want to mention this article from soundofhockey.com from John Barr, which gave us a pretty good update on how Shane Wright is doing, what he's looking like, and how those stats are also shaping up context-wise, too. Now, this was published on February 5th, which was a few games ago, so these stats have changed, but you could look in goals per game in the AHL. Forwards with 35-plus games, under 20 years old to start the season since 2014, and you can see Shane Wright is looking pretty good there, just below players like William Nylander, around the same right as Jacob Vrana and Mikko Rantanen as well, and that's not too bad there. But that's the thing, we already knew that Shane Wright can score goals, that he has that unreal shot, and it's not really surprising that he's scoring goals at the AHL level. That's a good thing, and hopefully we'll see that at least translate onto the NHL level too. We also got some bad news with Shane Wright recently, with him getting an upper body injury, suffering that against the Barracuda after an awful hit. So not only has AHL season just been pretty good and pretty okay, he now is out with potentially a concussion, which would be the worst case scenario. And I would say from the games that I've watched with Shane Wright at the AHL level, I think there has been some progression. I think there has been some improvement, which you would expect from any 20-year-old prospect. But again, it's just how much progression has there been. In Shane Wright's case, I thought he's looked good, and I think that adaptability, getting to the pro game, is definitely an important step for him to make. But again, it's all about expectations here in Shane Wright's case, especially for me as a person who ranked him first in my draft rankings. I obviously want to see this progression. I think it's great that we saw this progression, but I think that we're just, getting some progress at the AHL level at this point is still pretty disappointing to see. Especially when you consider, of course, the players around him, how they're developing. Slafkovsky looking incredible over these last couple of months for Montreal, really developing well physically. You got Simon Nemec as well, who really has jumped up into the NHL level this year and has played brilliantly for New Jersey. 14 points in 33 games in an offensive role, and he's done great there. You also got Logan Cooley, who in his first year in the NHL at 19 years old has looked about as good as you could hope for, even though there there has been some blemishes defensively, still 27 points in 55 games. The fact that he's been able to do that in Arizona system with the teammates he's had for the most part is also very impressive. And he also doesn't turn 20 until this May too. So a lot of players around him, players that were drafted ahead of him, have looked like players drafted ahead of him, that's for sure. And you look at Seattle's depth, and all these guys are NHL players, which obviously makes it hard for Wright, who's kind of on that borderline level, to really break out in a big way, which I think is why, again, next year we'll see him at his best, likely winning a job. Maybe Alex Wennberg is traded by then, and kind of a second-line center, maybe third-line center role opens up if he wants to be behind Matty Beniers and Yanni Gourde. That could maybe be a good fit there, but at the same time, that's the best we're hoping for, is that he's maybe a third-line center next year. Not exactly ideal. But I did want to touch on the Shane Wright and Juraj Slafkovsky debate, one that at least up to this point I have definitely been wrong about. I think the biggest difference between these two is just how much room there was to improve in both of these players. With Shane Wright, I think in his draft year and what we've seen, he was maybe not a complete player by any means. That definitely was not the case, but I think a lot of these things have kind of been refined, and we kind of saw a little bit of plateauness in Shane Wright's game. Meanwhile, Juraj Slafkovsky, I mean, you could tell how raw he was in his draft year, but how much potential there could be if a lot of these things aligned right. And you especially see how Montreal's development system has been able to work around Slafkovsky, how much better they've been able to translate a shot, how much more assertive they've been able to make his game, and all these little things that Slafkovsky has been able to learn. This is a guy that's obviously been a very teachable player, and that's something that Montreal obviously really like to see. But honestly, in the Shane Wright and Slafkovsky debate, this is one that I might have to learn a lot from, honestly, in the future. If this trajectory continues where Slafkovsky continues to outpace Wright, it will be a major learning experience for me, and that's what I always try to do with the channel and with the rankings and with my prospect analysis. I never try to be stagnant. I never try to be in one place and one opinion of all these guys. I always try to be moving and getting better, and in Slafkovsky's case, he's definitely proved me wrong, that's for sure. Still though, I don't want to make this a video where I'm absolutely dumping on Shane Wright. It's kind of just more of a video of, oh, now looking back on it, that 4th overall pick doesn't really seem all that crazy, and he would probably be drafted in the same range again. Maybe a Pavel Mintyukov or something goes ahead of him, maybe a David Jiricek or something, I'm not sure, but he would still probably be around that 4 to 6 range in a redraft. And to me, I still think there is potential in Shane Wright's game. I think that shot still has a lot to give. I think the maturity and the overall game is still very refined like it was in his draft year, and this is still a guy that I think can become a top 6 center, but likely more of a second-line center guy behind Matty Beniers than maybe a first-line center that I thought he could have been back in 2022. And that's okay. I mean, for a 4th overall pick, it's not the end of the world, and thankfully for Seattle, they got Beniers, who, even though he's had some struggles this season, I still think he's projecting to be that great all-around center for them, and you could have 2 guys around that same solid level for Seattle that will be very good leaders in the end, and that's not a horrible thing. Again, for Seattle, they pretty much went in, got that 2nd overall pick, and Beniers got that 4th overall pick, and were already looking great after that last season, so for them, it's not really too mad at all, and especially because of some of the defensive prospects they already have coming up, like Ryker Evans, too. Even though they passed up on a few guys, I think Wright will be perfectly fine for them, and in a lot of ways will be great for them too. I thought it would also be stupidly fun to look back on the 2022 draft and kind of do a mini redraft right now. As of right now, again, this could definitely change in the future, but in terms of players that are looking better than Shane Wright, you'd obviously have to include the players drafted ahead of him like Slafkovsky, Nemec, and Cooley. You would also maybe pull a player like Korchinski or Jiricek there, as well as Pavel Mintyukov. So in that respect, he would maybe go 7th in a redraft, which would be pretty interesting there. There might even be players for you that haven't even played in the NHL yet that you might prefer, like a Frank Nazar, maybe a Jimmy Stuggerud. Obviously, you have a fantastic pick with the Montreal Canadiens in a Lane Hutson, perhaps. There could be guys in that race as well that you could have over him. Lane Hutson, among guys that haven't played in the NHL, is probably the closest to that. And I want to know in the comments down below, if you had the chance to redraft the top 3 of the 2022 draft, what would you go for? Would Slafkovsky, Cooley be a part of that? Would Shane Wright still be in the top 3 for you? Would you have a Simone Nemec? Would you have somebody else like a Pavel Mintyukov in the race? Let us know all your thoughts down below. And also let us know what you guys think about Shane Wright at this stage in his career. Do you still have hope? Do you think he'll be a bust? Let us know all your thoughts down below. Of course, hit that like button, hit that subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you guys enjoyed this Shane Wright update and want to see more prospect content just like it. And click on this card as well for all my hockey prospects talk right in one playlist. My name is Nathan, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great hockey day, and goodbye.